Dear brothers and sisters in the Lord, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. For those who are joining us online, I would like you to know that this is the first time after 4 months that we are again celebrating Mass inside the San Roque Cathedral. For the past 4 months, we have been celebrating our daily and our Sunday Masses at the parish hall, the Inigas Hall. And so, it is with joy that we are able to gather together once again, at least for a 10% occupancy as prescribed by the IATF. And let us hope and pray that this pandemic will soon be over so that our own spiritual life, our liturgical gatherings can go back to normal. The other day, Miko, our parish liturgist, gave me a copy of the liturgy he had prepared for today on the occasion of my 14th Episcopal anniversary. He said, "I kept the readings for the day, Bishop. But if you want to choose your own readings, you have the prerogative to do so since you are celebrating your Episcopal anniversary." I answered immediately and I said, "No, Miko, I will just use the readings for the day. Ordinary lang." He smiled and said, "Yes, Bishop, actually, they are very appropriate for you." I felt a little bit intrigued by his remark. I wonder what he meant by that, I asked myself. This morning, while having my daily coffee with Jesus, I went through the readings and found myself smiling, finally realizing what Miko meant when he said the readings for the day were very appropriate for me. In the first reading, we encounter what I call a shift in the prophetic career of Hosea. I call him the romantic prophet, the prophet of the covenant. In the gospel reading, Jesus tells the apostles to be ready to be dragged before the authorities and to be brought to trial. Does that sound familiar to you? Well, in the first reading, the prophet Hosea is doing what he was not supposed to do as a prophet. He was playing the role of a priest. He had just denounced Israel and its leaders for all their crimes, their heartless regard for the widows and the orphans of their victims, for their injustices, and for their acts of idolatry, and for their infidelity to Yahweh their God. Now that they are seeing their country collapsing, almost in ruins, now that they are in a state of suffering and gradually learning their lessons the hard way, Hosea is suddenly asking God to forgive them. This is very unusual of a prophet. A prophet was expected only to proclaim the word of God, only to announce the will of God. He was just a spokesman, a messenger. He was not supposed to mediate. That is the job of a priest. And this priestly job usually required sacrifice. You cannot just expect God to change His will, to shift from punishment to forgiveness without sacrifice. But by then, even the prophet Hosea already knew that God detested the kind of sacrifices being offered by the priests. As far as he was concerned, they were fake sacrifices. It is Hosea who popularized the expression, "It is mercy I desire, not sacrifice." Jesus quoted that, but it is not original to him. He quoted it from Hosea, "It is mercy I desire, not sacrifice." Why then, you might ask, is Hosea suddenly shifting from the prophetic to the priestly role? What makes him convinced that God would listen to his mediation, to his plea for forgiveness on behalf of Israel? My answer to that is the reading that we heard last Monday. You may have noticed, for 1 week now, we have been reading from Hosea. Last Monday, and I was so tempted to preach about Hosea last Monday, but I could not connect him to the gospel. So last Monday, I chose to preach about the gospel instead of that passage from Hosea, which I consider one of the most beautiful oracles a prophet has ever written. Hosea could dare to plead for God's mercy for Israel because of the drama of his own life that had made him understand the heart of God. Brothers and sisters, it is my Episcopal anniversary anyway, the 14th, 7 times 2. So please, bear with me. If I take a little more of your time doing storytelling about the drama in the life of Hosea. This man has a very fertile imagination. He discovered in his own life the drama of Yahweh's love story with Israel. His wife, who was a slave, whom he had liberated from slavery, and whom he had espoused or married as a wife, turned out to be an ingrate. In Spanish, you say ingrato. Ingrata. She eventually ran away from him and took advantage of her newfound freedom. She became unfaithful and ran away with other men. In the anger of Hosea, he decided to divorce her so that she was stripped of all her rights and privileges as a free woman and found herself as a slave all over again. The prophet, having exacted his revenge, now asks himself, nakaganti na siya. The woman is back to slavery. This unfaithful woman, whom he liberated from slavery, is back to slavery. And now Hosea asks himself, is this what I really want? That this woman who returned my love with infidelity is now suffering miserably. Am I now satisfied to see her stripped of her freedom and humiliated and back to where she used to be? Why? Hosea laments, when I search within me, what I see is a wound, a festering wound. What is there about this mystery called love that is almost like a curse? That you cannot hurt the one you love without hurting yourself sevenfold. How indeed can I inflict pain on someone who is already a part of me? And so Hosea says, I decided to heal the wound, to bind up the wound. And I bought her back. I redeemed her from slavery. And one day, she came to me. She threw herself at my feet and she wept. She washed my feet with her tears, begging for forgiveness. She thanked me profusely for giving back her freedom. She offered to serve me again as a slave. She even offered to give me her body for my pleasure. But I looked at her and I said, no, you may go. I now realize that there is no way I can force you to love me. I did not buy your freedom so that you would slave for me. I did this because I loved you. What I wanted was not a slave, but a wife. And so, I am setting you free. You may go now. Don't worry. You owe me nothing. You may leave me if that is what you really wish. But if in the heart of your hearts you realize that you love me, then come back to me. I see some reaction from you because you're familiar with that song, the song of Hosea. And I hope it makes you appreciate even more the liturgical song with the opening lines, come back to me. Come back to me, not out of fear, but out of love. Return to me, not as a slave, but as my wife, my beloved. Return to me only if you can call me no longer my master, but rather my husband, my love. Do you hear Yahweh talking to Israel? Hosea's love story made it clear to the prophet what that love story was between Yahweh and Israel. And so you see why I say Hosea is shifting from prophet to priest, from messenger to mediator, confident that he could stir up the mercy of God and move him to forgive Israel. When we see what is happening to our country and to the world, I know there are people who say, we deserve this. I know there are people who say, we're just learning things the hard way. We deserve it. But let me shift from an angry prophet to a prophet of mercy. And let me end with that prayer of mercy. Talking to God, heart to heart, and saying, Lord, I know there are many things that you might be angry about. We're down on our knees. The world is suffering. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their businesses. And of all people suffering, it is the poor who suffer even more. Have mercy, O Lord. Forgive us. Because we know that you are a God of justice, but you are also a God of mercy. Hosea has radically changed the meaning of covenant between Yahweh and Israel. No longer is Israel supposed to see itself as a slave before a master, but as a beloved before the lover, or as a wife before the husband. Not only will it change Israel's understanding of their relationship with God, it would change their own understanding of marriage itself. And today I launched the book, Yeshua, Son of Man. And I am inclined to believe, as a storyteller, that one of the favorite books of Yeshua, aside from Isaiah, is Hosea, the prophet of the covenant. But he's not very fond of the husband and wife model of understanding the covenant. Maybe because he was a celibate. But you know, the model of covenant that Jesus preferred, instead of husband and wife, is also in Hosea chapter 11. It was the reading yesterday. When Israel was a child, I loved him. Out of Egypt, I called my son. The more I drew near, the more they went away from me. Though I stooped to feed my child, yet Israel did not know. Hosea shifts from lover to beloved to father and son. And Jesus would pick it up, and it will become the foundation of his experience, his most profound religious experience is the baptism at the Jordan. When the heavens opened and the Spirit descended on him, and he heard the voice that said, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." That suddenly changed the whole direction of Jesus' mission. And from here on, please read it in the book. Read especially the part about the baptism experience of Jesus and his relationship with John the Baptist. From here on, Jesus will be consumed by the message that we are children of God. He does not go about proclaiming that he is the Son of God. He was not calling attention to himself. He went about saying, we are children of God. We are children of God. And how did he make himself known? I am the Son of Man. Because it is important that the Son of God makes himself known to us, sons and daughters of men and women, so that we will see in Jesus and through Jesus our destiny to become ourselves God's children and to enter into that covenant, the covenant that Hosea has spoken about, so that we will know who we are and who we are called to be.